Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second of our lecture series for this winter of 2024. I have the honor of doing the introductions tonight, and I just realized, and so first of all, I want to welcome everyone, and then if I could have you do an invocation for us, if you would please. This is Terry Willis. Please, if you do our invocation before we start.
Will you pray with me, please? Dear Lord God, King of the universe, we praise you for your kindness and your goodness and just your blessing on this community throughout Ennis and this group of folks right here. We pray that you please help us to enjoy each other. Please help us to have a wonderful time with each other. But right now, Lord, I also ask that you work in this world at large, and I have to bring up in any prayer, I have to bring up, would you please deliver Ukraine and take care of those who are suffering, not only in Ukraine, but also in the Middle East, Gaza and Israel. Please watch over them all, Lord. Thank you for your love and your kindness. Thank you for listening to and answering this prayer. In your Son's name, and we all pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Daryl. Well, so next I need to also thank the folks of the First Methodist Church of Ennis for allowing us to meet here this evening. It's really great. It's, I think, a nice, comfortable room for us. And as we may have mentioned before, the library, while it's under renovation, we really don't have a good meeting space for a lecture series in town. But hopefully by next year, we'll be able to be back in the library again. But again, thanks to the Methodist Church, specifically Robbie Keever, he was here somewhere. And the Boones, Jimmy and Ginger Boone. So thank you very much. So now I have the pleasure of introducing David Hudgins to you all. And I think that I first had contact with David a couple of years ago when he was putting together this book on the golden age of railroad circuses in Ellis County. And he had contacted me to see if I knew of anyone who had pictures or any information about it here in Ennis. And at the time I remember reaching out to Jimmy Grant, and of course he denied any knowledge of anything about the railroads. And, just kidding. But I reached out to the people that I knew at the time, and so now David has completed this book, and we thought it would be just a wonderful idea, Ennis both being a railroad town and having our sister city, Waxahachie, just over there, and that both towns, it was news to me that railroads came to our county from the well, we'll learn all about it, but whatever. So the other thing to tell you about David is he grew up in Gilmer, Texas, out in East Texas, and then after college joined the Houston Fire Department, and then came to Waxahachie as fire chief in 1986, and eventually becoming the fire chief and retiring in 2012 from that. But he has stayed very active in the community. I thought of something else to thank you for. You had contacted me, Waxahachie, like we here in Ennis have the heritage plaques. Waxahachie has a similar thing, Historic Waxahachie. And then they also have these, I'll call them like a commemorative plaque with a photo etched on them and history of, like either an event that happened in a building or what a building in town might have looked like in the past and things like that. And I was interested in getting that information, and David was the guy that had been doing that for Historic Waxahachie Inc. So that's another way that I've looked to him for advice. So the book that he did came out a couple of years ago, and you can buy copies at, there he is, buy copies at the Ellis County Museum. David has also brought some copies tonight. If anyone is interested in having them personalized after his talk, that'd be wonderful. And he's going to talk to us about railroad circuses. It came to Ennis between 1880 and 1944. Well, that's just the other day. So, and he's also going to talk about P.T. Barnum and how a circus route was established, and how just the whole thing happened, how they managed to put a circus on the railroad and take it to all these towns around the state, around everywhere. So I've mentioned about the book signing after he talks, and then the other thing is our next month's lecture. That speaker will be Mr. Chuck Gossett of Houston, and he is going to speak on Texas heroes, and that lecture will be at the First Presbyterian Church just over there. So look for a message about that, because that'll be coming up next month. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome David.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, in 1955, my mother took me out of school and I lived in Gilmer, and we went over to Longview, which is about 20 miles away. And she took me to the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus in 1955, and that was the last year that circus showed under the big top in Texas. And I still remember it, and I still have the ring I purchased when I went to the sideshow from the tallest man in the world at the time. So that's what stayed with me, how a circus moves, why they did all this. So when I retired, I started doing a lot of research about the circuses, because I know railroads were so important in this county. And before 1872, there was really no such thing as a railroad circus. They traveled by wagons. They would show, they would pack everything up that night and go to the next town. And they got the nickname mud shows, and that stuck, mud shows, because the wagons kicked up the mud if it had rained, and the wagons were kind of dirty when they came to town. Well, in 1872, I got to get the good glasses on. P.T. Barnum was approached by W.C. Coop and Dan Costello. They owned a circus. And with P.T. Barnum had retired, P.T. Barnum was over 60 years old. They really wanted his name more than anything because he was so well known with his museums in New York. Of course, P.T. Barnum was famous for twisting words. In his museum, there were things like, "See the 6-foot man eating chicken." People flocked to that. They got in the room, there was a 6-foot man eating chicken. He didn't lie. He also would do things like, "This way to the egress." People were thinking, "Oh, I want to go see the egress." They went out back. They had to come around the front and pay again to get in. So P.T. Barnum did things like that. If I could get you to go ahead and pass these out, and those are for y'all to keep.
Can everyone hear, by the way, because I have a microphone too.
If I'm not loud enough, just let me know. If I go too long, give me the signal and I'll hush. But on the screen here, this is the picture that I love to show to start a program because of the excitement. And you can see on the barn back there, there's a large poster, and this boy is just so excited the circus is coming to town. Most schools would declare a holiday on Circus Day because it was something that was just unbelievable. As you can see by those deals that go back to 1880, you remember that the Wright brothers in the early 1900s finally got off the ground for a few seconds. In 1908, they take their plane to Paris, and they fly around a ring for 2 whole minutes. So you can tell people are looking for something to do. They go to work, they go home, and there's no excitement in their life. And so when a circus comes to town, it's a big deal. So that's what this first slide depicts. Now, the next thing we've got here is, here she comes, the most exciting part of the circus coming to town. But at this part, I wanted to go over about what does it take to put that circus together. It just doesn't happen and show up and decide to go to this town or that town. The first thing that they do is they have to establish the route. I have 2 original route. One of them is 1925 and one of them is 1928. Both of them show, if you want to pass those around, let people look at them. Both of those show the circus coming to Ennis. It'll be on the far right. It was too hot in the summertime, so it would be October, November before the circuses would show up here because it was simply too hot. But when you look at that and you see all the towns that they had to consider, I'd say 98% of them are one-day shows. That circus is not even in your town 24 hours. They show up early in the morning around 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. The next section may come in 20 minutes or so, or 30 minutes, however long it took them to empty the first section. And so they had to establish this route. One of the things that they had to do was they had to know the size of the town. That was one of the reasons that P.T. Barnum in 1872 with his partners decided to go to the railroads, because going from a town to a small town, it was not profitable for a big show. And his was a big show. So they basically decided, if we rent rail cars, then we can go to the towns that we want to. And so that is actually where the railroad circus started. The circuses didn't start in America, but the railroad circus did. P.T. Barnum and his partners were the first ones to create a railroad circus. They also later on would go on to buy rail cars, and they would do things like railroads charged per car that went on the rail. Well, they got with the railroad companies, and where a flatbed was normally 30 foot long, they created flatbeds that were 70 foot long. So now they're only paying for 1 car, but it's equivalent to 2. So they did a lot of things like that. Things that they'll look for is the size of town, the industry, the paydays. What kind of farming goes on around here? When do they harvest those crops? Because it's very important. You don't want to come to town at harvest time or be late on the payday side. So you have to take all that in consideration. So once you decide that we're going to come to Ennis, every town that you see on that list that's going around, you have an agent that has to go to that town. He has to go to that town. He has to find a lot big enough for that circus to show on. He has to make sure that there's potable water there. They need a lot of water for the animals. The distance from downtown, because they're going to put on a parade. Then they have to go to City Hall, and they have to pay any fees or taxes for putting on a show in town. Then they go to the grocery store, and they order food for that day. Circuses will normally only carry a 2-day supply of food on the rail cars in case something goes wrong. other than that, that town is going to get a big payday. Because not only do they have to order, and we'll look at food here in just a minute. Not only do they have to order food, but they have to order food for the animals also. So the feed store gets a lot of business that day. And that agent sets all that up and then moves on to the next town on that route card that's going around. The circus owners are putting the show together. They're looking at new acts. They're looking at the number of animals, how they're going to fit on the train cars, equipment needed, how they're going to fit on the train cars, music for the show, and the show will leave in April. Now, 2 weeks before the show arrives in town, like Ennis, there's going to be an advance or an advertising card that shows up. They're the ones that are going to put up the posters and do all that. And what I've here is a diagram of inside an advertising card. You can see on the far left, this is the paste room. This is where they have boilers. The water tanks are in the ceiling, so all the water is gravity fed. They have tables here and here to do all that, because what they're going to do is they're going to take that poster and they're going to put Ennis on it and the date, so that when they arrive here, they're ready to go and hang these posters on every barn, pole, every store window that'll let them put them up. They're going to do it, but it's going to have the date on there. So that's where they stay. Now, here's a picture of the inside of one, and you can see these are the tables up there. Those are the bunks. So at night, you twist that, it comes down. They still have that on trains today. If you go on Amtrak, they'll be and you stay in a sleeper, your upper berth will be just like that right there. So the man would have to jump up on the table and then jump into his bed. Now these cars are not air conditioned. So sometimes it can get very hot, and that's why they don't usually come to Oklahoma, Texas, down in here until October, November, sometimes late September. I want to show you something I just got here the other day, and this is a picture of Forepaugh Sales Brothers Circus. This car was brand new in 1904. That advertising car will show up in Ennis in 1905. That car right there. Now, after the people come to the bill posters come to town, put all these posters up, they're gone that night to the next town. Then there'll be a 24-hour man. 24 hours before the show gets here, another agent will come to town. He will check through everything. Is the lot ready? All our taxes or fees have been paid. The grocery stores are ready for us. The feed store is ready for us. Then he'll mark the way from the rail yard to the show lot. Then he'll move to the next town and start doing the same thing. He'll also work with the newspapers. This is just a picture of putting it on a barn, and if you look at the farmer's hands, he's got some tickets in his hands, because that's usually what they would do. If you'll let us put this on your barn, we'll give you free tickets to the circus. That works for me. Here are some ads from the Ennis newspaper. Just kind of want to go through these. If you, Hesser Drugstore, I don't know where that was. Okay. That's where you could buy extra tickets. Buy tickets to the show. And what they would normally do is they didn't pay that drugstore or wherever they were going to do it. It's just a walk-in traffic. The drugstore wanted to sell them to get that extra walk-in traffic. So that was their reason. But you can see every year they're going to do something different. they're going a geisha. You know, they're going to try to really sell this thing. Here's another ad. This is October the 4th, 1901. This Four-Paw Sales Brothers is actually owned by James Bailey of Barnum and Bailey. He actually owns this show. And so it came here on September the 24th, 1901. And you can just see all the things going on. And you can imagine people in 1901 reading the newspaper here in Ennis and getting excited over seeing all of this. Here's another circus, the Gentry Brothers. Now, they also came in 1901. And sometimes circuses would find out when another show was coming, and they would jump that date and show before them. Because they showed on September 24th, 1901, Four-Paw Sales was here October the 4th, so they're pretty close. So the Gentrys probably jumped that date to get ahead of them. Here's another one. This is 1919. And again, they're talking about the street parade. Everything is larger and better and everything going on in the waterproof tents. So it doesn't matter if it rains. Here's another one, the Sales Floto. And Castawell Drugstore. Castellal Drugstore. I guess y'all know where that was or is.
May I
Sure.
Does anyone know where Davis Field was on Crisp Road? I know where Crisp Road is, but sorry to interrupt.
No, that's a good point, because a lot of times they don't tell where these shows set up, so that one is good that it tells you.
Oh, yeah, Texas Midland.
Now, like I said earlier, these trains are not air conditioned. So when it got hot, you see what the people do. A lot of them get up on top and ride on top. They even sleep on top if it's too hot inside sometimes. That's just the way it was at the time. I mean, now there's no way anything like that could go on, but that was the way it was. All right, let's talk about the train. And this is the workers' car. So these are men that put up tents, that do all that sell the stuff during the show in the big top, work the midway, do all this. 3 high bunks. Everybody has 1 bunk. You have anything that you can put in your bunk that's it. There's no cabinets, there's no really anything. So they were very limited in what they could do. And you can see how that would be very warm in the summertime, when some of them decided to go on top. The next one shows you the married couple's car. And they also had unmarried women had a car like this. You had 2 bunks and a curtain. So if there was a man and woman, he would have the top bunk, she would have the bottom bunk. That's your privacy. I'll just leave it at that. All right, let's go now. This is one of the big stars. She has a piano in her room. She has a radio in her room. She has a fan, and she has a ceiling fan up there. So you can see the difference between the workers' cars, the married couples that are not big stars versus a star's quarters. Some of them would get a whole, if they were a big enough star, they'd get a whole train car for their quarters. This would be the owner's car. The owner's car would have a kitchen, crew's quarters for 2, an office, 2 bedrooms with a connecting bath, a sitting room, and a back porch for the owner. On the Stars part of the train, they would have a diner, and they would have around 14 people from the culinary department to serve the Stars their meals while the train was going. Because most of these shows didn't show on Sunday. That's a big travel day for them, so they still had to eat, and sometime even late at night they would have these open. Now, if you're a regular worker, you went to the pie car. They served pie, sandwiches, and coffee. And they had tables and different things, but that's where you would go to eat if you were just a regular worker. Now, unloading. There would be, this picture doesn't show it, and as we talked about earlier, normally this was probably the second section, but the first section will get there around 4 or 5 in the morning, and there'll be hundreds of people. And one of the things that the circus does, because they don't have enough people, is they will recruit young boys and young men to help set up, to carry water buckets, to do all those type things for free tickets to the circus. So a lot of kids that couldn't afford to go to the circus, if they'll work, they can get free tickets for it. The first tent to always go up is the cook tent. Depending on the size show, but the shows that came here, you would probably have anywhere between 70 and 170 people in the culinary department alone. They will serve over 4,000 meals a day. Everyone gets the same food. Everybody has an assigned seat. Sideshow people in one area, workers in another area, stars in another area, office personnel in another area. And if you look, you see men, all of them wearing ties and all that, which that was what they did at the time. But it doesn't matter who you are, your food is brought to you by waiters in these white caps and white aprons. And everyone got the same food. It was no different if you were the best star of the show or you were the worker. You got the same food. Normally in the morning, they will cook between 500 and 700 pounds of bacon and sausage every morning. They will cook thousands of pancakes every morning. They will assign, depending on the size of the show, 5 to 10 men to do nothing but crack eggs that morning. When the workers get there, they work in shifts. So there is no stoppage of work. It's just that this group will go eat and then that group will go eat, because this third and fourth sections, if it's a 4 section train, will get there later and then they'll come eat at that time. But your noon meal and then your evening meal will all be just like you see right there, with everybody eating together. Now remember, we talked about going to the grocery store and the feed store and buying food. This is how much food they needed every day for the circus. 12,500 pounds of hay, 3,000 pounds of oats. I mean, you just go down that list. That's what they needed every day. Now, if you were a grocery store in town and they came to you with this order, that was Christmas. Same thing with the feed store. I mean, you're going to have a great day. So you wanted the circuses to come here because you were going to have a good payday. Now you've got the men driving, and it's amazing that they did all that in the same motion. Pow, 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 pow. And but doing this every day from April to November, I mean, they got where a group like this could go around and hit those stakes and not hit each other. Later on, they developed steam drivers, stake drivers, and they did that. But there were so many stakes that they had to drive in the ground, especially if it was dry, that they still had to have the stake driving teams. Then putting up the poles for the big top. You can see the men pushing them up, and then elephants would pull them up the rest of the way. And just think about this now. That's every day. You take that thing down after 10 o'clock at night, pack it all up, load it on the train, try to get you some sleep, get there in the morning, do this, to do the same thing. And you basically got Sundays off, and that was it. Tough life. Now you've got the poles up, and they would lace the tent together. So that means that night they've got to take all that apart again and then load it back on. And when they got there, and if they were not essential in setting up tents and doing that, a lot of the women had to wash clothes. I mean, you got to wash your clothes. And so they would use the tent ropes to run their clotheslines on. And you hope you had a good sunny day. If you didn't, you had to pack them back and then wash them the next day and hang them up again. So that's just some of the things that you had to do, and it's kind of being a tough life. There's a barber shop. So you had a barber shop where you could go get your hair cut, a shave, do all those type things also. Now, each person on the crew, especially the stars, would get 2 buckets of water. One for drinking, one for washing your clothes. Now, the big shiny stuff, they had a laundry department with the circus that took care of that. So this is just taking care of your own clothes. At about 10:30, 11 o'clock, you're going to start the circus parade. Circus parades were to drum up business for the circus. And then about 1922, they decided we really don't need to drum up business. People know, and they're coming to town, coming to the circus. So, but these are just some of the circus wagons I picked out. This one is a calliope. As you can see from the inside, the steam whistle's there. And this one is a band wagon, so you would have had the circus band on that one playing music during the parade. They come back, start putting everything up. It's time for lunch now. It's 12 o'clock or better. And so again, this is just a different picture of inside of a cook tent. And so everybody's eating, because the midway doesn't open till 1 o'clock. So they've got a short time to put everything away. And the people that are not needed will go ahead and take those parade wagons and go ahead and put them back on the train, so that they're already loaded to take off. Now the midway opens at 1 o'clock, and you can see the people, and you've got probably some games over here. This is going to be the menagerie. The menagerie was in front of the big top. And so you bought a ticket for the big top, you got to go through the menagerie. There you're going to see the camels and all the different elephants and the zebras and the cage bears and whatever. Most towns did not have a zoo, so this was something that was big to them to be able to go through there. And if you've ever been through a menagerie tent, you know the smell will stay with you for the rest of your life. But now let's talk about the sideshow on the right over there. Today people would say this is not right because you're I don't know if making fun is the right word, but these people with deformities, you're putting them on display. Most of these people could not really find jobs. Their families may not could take care of them. And this was a way for them to make a good living. Most of them retired, very wealthy, actually, because you're being taken care of. And so I'm trying to use the right words here, but anyway, this was a way for them to make a good living with the problems that they had. Now I want to talk about a couple of sideshow people here. You can see on the right, it's the giant of giants, and you can see him in the middle of the screen. That man's from Texas. He'll later be known on the Ringling Brothers show as the Texas Giant. He's over 8 foot tall. Now the other lady we're going to talk about is the banner on the left over here, Frances O'Connor, the Armless Wonder. He is from Franklin County, Texas. The way he got the job was there was a circus in town, and he walked in and somebody said, well, you're taller than the tallest man in the world. And he got up there, they fired that guy and hired him right on the spot. And so this is a postcard that he sold at the circus, and he got to keep all the money. He also sold rings, and he got to keep all the money from that. So that's what I'm saying. They made good money, and they were taken care of, and they were respected by other circus people. Now let's talk about Frances there. They called her the Living Venus de Milo, is what they called her. She was born without arms. She could feed herself. She could drink. She could write. She could smoke a cigarette. She could knit. She could sew. She was actually in a film in 1932 called Freaks, and it was about a circus show where the owners were doing some things, and all of the sideshow people got together. But she was in that also. Her mother traveled with her, and she actually didn't die until 1982. So she lived a long life. After her days with the circus, she never had to work again or try to get any assistance or anything. She had enough money to do that. So now let's look inside the big top. Inside the big top, will usually seat somewhere between 7,000 and 15,000 people, depending on the size of the show. A lot of seats. The first thing they'll do when the ringmaster will blow his whistle and everybody will quieten down. We're ready for the show to start. They do the pitch. The pitch is where they come out and they say, we've made special arrangements with this toy company or this balloon company, and just today only, we're going to be able to sell this at half price, just today. And so they would do that until sales, then they'd blow the whistle and they'd start the show. But it's known as the pitch. I wanted to talk about just two of the acts. I mean, I could probably do a whole deal on the acts, but I wanted to talk about two. This is Clyde Beatty, probably one of the best animal trainers the circus ever had, except for Williams later on with Ringling Brothers. His was a fighting act. He had a whip, but he never never hit an animal with the whip. It was just a popping sound. He used a chair, and then he had a gun on his side with blanks in it, because they knew if they got in trouble, they could pull that out and shoot it, and the lions or tigers would get away from them. So this was Clyde Beatty, and this is one of the posters that probably, because it was Hagenbach and Wallace, would have been here in Ennis, and so this poster, more than likely, were in the store windows in Ennis at that time. The next one I want to talk about is called Iron Jaws. You're going to have a lady, or ladies, and this is the device that they used to swing from the top of the tent. As you can see the red there, that's their lipstick. They put their teeth in here, and that is all that is holding them up at the top of the tent. They're called the Tybell sisters. This is four-paw sails also, and you can see that they had a ring and it would go around and they'd grab the butterfly deal and it looked like a giant butterfly at the top of the tent, and they did other things like that. And the only thing that's holding them on is their teeth. That's it. And I'm thinking, I was up there and I had to cough, what would I do? I'm not sure. But later on, the Tybell sisters were a big act. They changed their act some. They went from different shows, even Ringling Brothers at one time. This is another sales photo, and you can see how they've changed the act and what they're doing there. And it was a big deal. It was a big deal when the Tybell sisters came to town. Now, I want to show you, because when you go in the big top, more than likely, they're going to try to sell you a program. And so I just brought some of the programs that were sold here in Ennis. Now, I don't mean this one actually came from Ennis, but the same thing. This is Sales Floto with Buffalo Bill. Buffalo Bill will lead the parade. You want to pass that around? Please don't take it out of the cover, because some of them are kind of brittle. But that one was actually sold here. That in 1915 is when they came here with Buffalo Bill. So Buffalo Bill would have led the parade in downtown Ennis. He always led the parade. William Cody, that is. But so the next one is 1901. Pass that one around. You can kind of see the cover. Here is one from 1910. Here is one from 1928. And here is one from 1907. And like I say, I brought those because they're all a program just like that was sold here in Ennis. And that one was 1907, that last one I passed around. Now, truth in advertising, I don't have a slide of this one. I'll just pass this one around, but I'll read the heading of it. Oldest man in the world, Mr. Stevens Joyce of Waco, Texas, has made an affidavit that he is 148 years old. He is still in possession of all his faculties. He says that Duffy's Pure Malt Whiskey has been his only medicine and has kept him vigorous at 148 years of age.
Where can I get some?
Yeah, I looked it up and I couldn't find any, but. And on the back of that one, there's also some other ads for corsets and things. So that in there, you had all kind of things. There's one of them I had that was a special tonic, and it made you feel better. And down in the fine print, it said 10% alcohol. That's a lot of alcohol. So it probably did make you feel good. Now the last circus, railroad circus, not the last circus, the last railroad circus to come here was 1944. What had happened during the Depression, the railroads took out a lot of side tracks because they had to pay for all that. So it was a way for them to save money. And so there weren't as many railroad circuses, especially after World War II or during World War II, because after World War II, most of them went to, and they still call the truck shows mud shows, but they could get, there were a surplus of trucks, parts, there were a lot of mechanics that had been in the service, so a lot of them got off the railroad and went to truck shows or mud shows. This show here, the Daly Brothers, is from Gonzales, Texas. And they were here April 19th, 1944. I will say this, in the book that he talked about earlier, I missed that one. I missed that show coming here. It came here, and then the next day it went to Waxahachie. So I missed it because I was going through the newspapers and I was looking at September, October, November, and they came in April. Because they're starting in Gonzales, so they're coming up, and so they could show, and it was still cool here at that time. Now we talked about earlier about the advance car coming to town, and they're going to hit a barn, and they're going to, I mean, you can just imagine if you're driving down the road, you're not going to miss that. And they did that in the 40s, 50s, and probably in the 60s also. This is what you might have seen downtown in some of the store windows, is introducing the Daly Brothers Circus, big 3-ring circus and menagerie. And you can see all the rail cars there. That's just a picture of their train cars. And the last slide is another picture of their train cars. The one thing I did find was with the interurban here, there were ads put in the paper, even in the 40s, when Ringling Brothers would go to Corsicana, and they would have an ad in the Ennis paper that said, we have special interurban cars going to the circus in Corsicana. So you can get on, go to the circus, we will bring you back that night. So even though the railroad circus ended here in 1944, the last Ringling Brothers show in Corsicana was 47. So you could still see that show from right here in Ennis. I'll pass around one last program. This is the Daly Brothers program. And then one last thing I wanted to talk about right quick is just kind of give you a little information on that piece of paper I handed out about the Ennis Railroad Circuses. Just to give you a little background. I told you that Forepaugh Sales was owned by James Bailey. That's not his real name. His real name is McGinnis. His parents died. He ran away from, his sister was taking care of him, and his sister beat him and did a lot of mean things. He faked his death going swimming, headed across the country, ended up being a bellboy, I believe in Pontiac, Michigan, and ran into a circus agent coming to town, carried his bag for him by the name of Bailey. Mr. Bailey hired him to help put up posters and stuff, and he took his name, not legally, but so when you hear Barnum and Bailey, Bailey's not his real name. There are stories that say that his wife did not even know his name was McGinnis until he died. Anyway, James Bailey purchased the four-paw circus in 1890, and then he worked with the Sales Brothers Circus, and that's when it became one circus together, and that was 1896. In 1904, he will buy out the Sales Brothers and he will own the whole thing. 1905, he will sell half of that circus to the Ringling Brothers. He will die in 1906, and then the Ringling Brothers will buy the rest of it, the other half of the circus, in 1907. I guess that's the end of the program. Does anybody have any questions I might answer? Yes, ma'am.
When we saw the programs will cost 5 cents and 10 cents, what was the admission to the circus?
Most of the time back in that period, it was 50 cents for adults and 25 cents for children. Later on, before the Depression, it goes up to 75 cents and 50 cents for children. Yes, ma'am.
That was an awful lot of money for that time.
Yeah, it was. It was.
And the programs were 10 cents, and
That's a lot of money. And a postcard was probably a dime, that we saw from the sideshow people. And the ring was probably a quarter or 30 cents.
Was it economics that finally got the services?
Basically, what happened is when the Great Depression hit, it knocked a lot of them out. The four-paw sales circus was, like I said earlier, was owned by the Ringlings at the end. And you can see they came here in, the last one was when four-paw sales, not sales Floto, but
Yeah, it becomes sales flow.
yeah,
Four-paw sales.
1910. Ringling Brothers will shut them down after the 1911 and sell off what they don't want. They'll put the rest of it in their show, and so that was the end of it. So they came here in 1910. After the 1911 season, they were gone. A lot of them went into, like I say, the Depression, and then that just knocked them out. People didn't have the money to go to the circus. Only the big circuses were able to do that, and that was the way Ringling Brothers was able to survive, is that they had such a name and they only went to big cities. Well, a lot of cities, if you say 25% of the population didn't have a job, that's still 75% that did and could go to those shows. And that's what stopped them from coming to a lot of small towns, that and the side tracks were gone. Because like I said, that circus is not in town for 24 hours, but you still got to have side tracks for 50. At one time, Ringling will have over 100 rail cars to carry their show. So these shows right here were probably 50 to maybe 80 rail cars. So there had to be enough side tracks here to put them on until they could load them up that night and they're gone. Yes, ma'am.
So, at the beginning of your slide, one of those said, I thought I saw the word compress field, or like maybe the gin.
Oh, maybe that was one of the ads in the
One
paper?
of the ads,
Okay,
and
well,
then
let's
the other one,
let's go back to
ad
the
in
ads.
newspaper, and then you said Davis Field on Chris Road.
Yeah, I saw that one.
But we've always heard there were, we were talking about the end of Preston Street. So the railroad tracks had tracks at, back there.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's the,
Well, what they're going to do is
yeah,
does that one say anything?
somewhere, it was up at the top of
Okay, let's keep going back. Not on that one.
That says Bass Brothers there. Did you see that? That's the
Compress.
Compressed circus grounds. So what a lot of, I said those agents would come to town and they would have to find a place. Well, after a while, it seemed like there was a place that all the circuses would set up. So when they came to town, they didn't have to hunt for but it looks like here there were different sites with the compress being one of them.
Yeah, if you're familiar, you're familiar with, I would say probably by Leggett and Platt, but I can't swear that, but that field was gigantic.
Right.
And the spurs went right.
Lisa, when I was a kid, I can remember going to a circus at the Compress, under the big tent, but I think it was one of the truck circuses.
Oh, okay. Yes, because by then it would.
But it was definitely there at the Compress because it was across
Still
from
using
St.
that
John's
field.
School.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it didn't matter.
When I was a young boy, there was the city of Gainesville,
Mm-hmm.
north here. They had a Gainesville Community Circus, and it came to Ennis. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes, sir. I sure have. I have some posters and some programs.
Right up here on Rock Street. Right uptown.
That was something that was just unbelievable. He's talking about the Gainesville Community Circus. And I believe it was in the late 20s, they had a theater downtown, kind of a vaudeville type theater, and they couldn't quite pay the rent, so they started a circus to get enough money to pay for it, an in-town circus. And it wasn't just a little backyard thing. And it grew and it grew. None of the people that performed ever got paid. Everything went back into the circus. They ended up having elephants. They ended up having lions and tigers. And if you go to Gainesville today, Gainesville has a zoo. And the reason they have a zoo was because in the 50s, when they got out of the circus business, they needed something to do, so they started a zoo in Gainesville. And they call it the Frank Buck Zoo. That's another story, Mr. Buck.
What year do you think that ad is?
That ad, I may have the year on it. Let me look.
It was in 1924, I could buy balls. 1928. Near the bottom of your list.
28, yeah. Yeah, it should be on that list that I handed out there. 28, so that would have, yeah.
That Gainesville Circus, they had trapeze artists and everything.
Yes.
All that community.
And you might have a housewife that's a trapeze artist. You may have a secretary at the hospital that's a trapeze artist. You may have a bank president that's a trapeze artist. You might have a janitor at the school that's a clown. They just all did. They had people that one person was over transportation, because if this circus was playing out of town, they had to get the people there and back. So there was one person that lined up enough cars that they could carry the circus people to Ennis. They came to Waxahachie one time. But it was unbelievable. They had a fire in the early 50s and in a warehouse, and it destroyed a lot of their equipment, and that was kind of TVs were coming in, and they just started, and they quit finally. But
I think it's interesting about thinking about there weren't zoos around, like certainly in small towns.
Right.
That all these exotic animals would be a big, seeing the elephant.
well, I know,
I think that's really
and
something I wouldn't think of nowadays.
right. I know in 1955 when my mother carried me to Ringling Brothers and going through the menagerie, I can still picture that to this day. Even though I've been to zoos and stuff, it was just totally different. Elephants swaying and you know, you could go up and feed an elephant a peanut or something. I mean, nowadays, oh, that'd just be terrible. But you could do that back then.
The other question I had, did the entertainers, were they under contract with those circuses?
Yes.
They didn't, so they didn't jump around?
No, now a lot of times they would, you know, start out in a circus and then try to go to a bigger circus where they could get a bigger payday. There was one lady, her name was Lillian Litzel, and she did act on the rings at the top of the tent. Then she would come back down, she would go up a rope, put her hand in that rope with a swivel on it, and she would do what they call planges, and that was she would kick herself over and rotate that arm and go over, and the crowd would just start counting, and she would do a minimum of 75, and I think her record was like 150 for one show. So I mean, does anybody else have a question?
I noticed there are 10 different, companies here.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect, you said a lot of them went out with the Great Depression, so it seemed like there's a lot of competition. How many were there exactly, in like the different companies and circuses?
Well,
If it cost that much money, one circus coming to the town, I don't know that I could afford to go to, tell my kids, sorry man, can't go to the circus twice this year. So.
a lot of times they would, in the newspaper, they would, if just like the one we pointed out in 1901, if that other show found out, they would start advertising and wait for the big one. We're the big one, wait for us. And so there was a lot, and it just seems like as time went on, about another 10 or 15 years, all that kind of stopped, and they didn't jump each other and stuff. And but if you had a show and you sent it out and you had a lot of bad weather, that might do you in right there, because you can see from just the food alone how much it costs to put that show on every day.
I wonder with the expansion of the railroad, if that also allowed for, to go different places and expand.
Oh yeah, that did, and that's, just like here, when the railroads came in, my understanding from Houston, hit Corsicana, and that's what kind of made Corsicana. And then they came through and created Ennis and Palmer, and then went on to Dallas. And that was the first line, and that was in the late 1860s. And so that was a main line that circuses used to get to Corsicana, to get to Waco, to do that, until the other lines started coming in, like the Katy and Burlington and those.
Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey moved their headquarters to Houston. Are they still in existence anywhere?
Yes, they are coming back out. 2017 was their last year to do what we think of as Ringling Brothers Circus. My understanding, they're coming back out with a circus, and they're going to call it Ringling Brothers, but it's like Circus Soleil. No animals, all trick type stuff, balancing, like if you've seen Circus Soleil, it'll be like that. So COVID got a lot of the circuses that we had around here, like Carson and Barnes, Carson and Barnes was big here in Ennis and Waxahachie. But when COVID shut them down, it just seemed to, I'm not sure they're still out there anymore. I hadn't heard of anything from them anymore, especially in this area.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes.
I really